Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to Box Football. Game week 14 is in the books, and I'm sorry to say you've only got me today. James and I have been super busy, and with these kind of game weeks stacking on top of each other, we're having 2 a week now. It's very difficult for us to both find the time to record, edit, and all this other stuff. I've just started a new job. James is running his own business. We've got a hell of a lot going on, but it's just going to be me today. I do have James's scores for game week 15, and the game week 16 video will hopefully be coming out later tonight, so there'll be more of a chance to watch it. But we're just going to break down what happened in game week 14, and I'm just going to give you mine and James's predictions for game week 15, the midweek games that are starting tonight. First of all, let's look back at game week 14. And actually, before I do that, because I'll be mad at myself if I don't do this, and I know it's horrible, but if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, guys. We'd really appreciate it. I believe we're 20 or 30 subscribers away from 1,000. If you'd like to be in our first 1,000 subscribers, we'd really appreciate it. While you're down there as well, hitting that subscribe button. If you drop us a like as well, we'd really appreciate it. Just helps with the algorithm and supports me, James, and the channel. Game week 14. As you can see by the scores, I'm not the happiest ever. 5 out of 10 for me in terms of the correct results. No bonus points at all for the correct scores as well. James with 8, I think, managed to call one more score than me, which was the Bournemouth Aston Villa draw, which was a very tricky result. So all credit to James there. And also the correct result from Nottingham Forest versus Everton gives James a 3-point advantage of game week 14. Things to look back on. Liverpool-Fulham was a crazy game. Nobody expected that. You saw my 4-1, James's 3-0. I think we thought relatively comfortable for Liverpool, but it was anything but that. Chelsea versus Brighton as well. Even Chelsea with a man down, coming back and being able to beat that was huge. James had the Brighton win. I had the Chelsea draw, so very crazy one. And then Burnley putting 5 past Sheffield United, showing that on their day, I know it's against Sheffield United, but on their day, they can still deliver. James is 3 points more than me. Those of you who've been paying attention, and this proves that even if there's a big gap, that can be chopped down. And I've had several bad weeks in a row. James and I are back level on 89 points apiece. So let's scroll down to game week 15 and let's see how James and I are having this week unfolding. First of all, tonight, I believe all these games are on Amazon Prime. It's Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Burnley. I've gone for 2-1. James has gone for 1-1. Look, I don't think last week's result with Burnley scoring 5 goals can be ignored. I know it was against Sheffield United, but that can't be ignored. That's a really big deal. And I think a lot of people pre-season thought that this Burnley team might be somewhere around 11th to 13th maybe in the table. So the pre-season and how impressive they were in the Championship, I think would, that 5-0, you might go, oh, of course. But obviously, looking back at the other 14, 13 game weeks, we've not really seen those performances yet. Maybe James here is just thinking that this is going to kickstart Vincent Kompany and this Burnley team into what we saw part of last year in the Championship. For me, it's the same old story with Wolverhampton Wanderers. Talented players, good manager in there. I know maybe he lacks a little bit of conviction and maybe he's not the most imposing or assertive or intimidating kind of manager, but I do think he's very talented. I think he had an appearance on Monday Night Football that was very impressive. As far as I'm concerned with Wolves, chance created, not a problem. It's actually putting the ball in the net at home against Burnley. I think Burnley, especially away from home, this is going to be a much more difficult proposition than Sheffield United. And I can just see Wolves eking it out. But obviously, again, maybe some chances squandered. So James and I disagreeing on the first result of the week. That's interesting. Second one, yes, again, James's Arsenal, 2-0 victory away from home at Luton Town. I've still got Arsenal scoring 3 because I think Arsenal will score first, which will then mean Luton, especially at home, maybe with the fans on their back as well, are going to try and come out and attack Arsenal, which will give Arsenal a little bit more space, maybe in behind, and maybe a little bit more movement or at least room to operate within midfield. I just think that this Arsenal team will be able to beat them. But I do think there's going to be some fight back and that this Luton Town aren't dead and buried just yet. There was a time, I think, that we thought maybe that Derby County record was in danger of getting beaten, but I just think that, unfortunately for this Luton team, they're not well prepared. Arsenal far superior. I don't think it'll be convincing. But again, if you're league leaders and you haven't had a great game yet, I think that's, holds well for you going into the new year and on to next season. Certainly a little less emotional Arsenal, it seems, this year, which has put them in good stead, maybe for a title charge going into the latter stages of the season. Sheffield United versus Liverpool, again, super convincing for me, super convincing for James. The reason why I didn't go 3, 4, or 5 or something like that, Chris Wilder's come back in. And again, was it pretty with Chris Wilder before? Absolutely not. No, it was kind of gross. And I don't know if anybody thought that this was the best kind of thing. It was kind of a Sean Dyche Burnley 2.0. But what I will say is that new manager bounce is a very, very real thing. If this is at Anfield, it's a little different. And guys, Liverpool a little bit shaky after conceding 3 goals at Fulham. Right, I do want to say that is right, isn't it? Yeah, Liverpool Fulham was 4-3 last week. So I think there is a window here where maybe this is a trip-up game for Liverpool. I'm not going to bet on that. I'm obviously taking Liverpool against the worst team in the league, so I'm going to definitely go with the 2-0. But I would understand why somebody might go for a draw or might have a very, very narrow Liverpool win in that game. Fulham, Nottingham Forest. Let's take a look here at what James and I have done. 2-0 for me, 2-1 for James. Yeah, guys, again, you must hate watching these videos because it's just me repeating myself every single week. But as far as I'm concerned, this Nottingham Forest team are very, very difficult to pin down. They have so many players who on their day you go, wow, man, that's super impressive. But then they will just let you down in other areas as well. It still feels like a team that's getting to know itself a little bit. There'll be shock losses, but there'll also be shock victories. Fulham, however, I do feel like is a little bit different. I'm a really big fan of Marco Silva. Willian somehow is just playing out of his skin and continues to be a game changer in Premier League football in the year 2023, which is insane. And again, as much as it would have been disappointing, I think, for Fulham to lose that Liverpool game after scoring 3 goals at Anfield as well, I just think that maybe they'll get some confidence from that game. And if I was Marco Silva, I'd be telling my players, hey guys, we've just scored 3 goals at Anfield, and Liverpool, I'm sure, felt that they were in trouble at some point. I think that's going to be enough, especially at home, especially at Craven Cottage. I just think that Fulham will be able to get by on this one. James has it a little closer, but we both have Fulham taking all 3 points. Crystal Palace versus Bournemouth. Guys, Bournemouth have been very impressive of late. Very impressive. Semenyo, I know I brought him up last week. He then scored again. Very talented player. Technically gifted, physically very, very gifted as well. And again, some of his play style and some of his swagger, especially dribbling and moving with the ball, reminds me of a player who might be able to make it for a Europa League, Champions League team, kind of competing football team. So one to look out for there, maybe into the future. And again, Bournemouth changing managers and bringing in this kind of new style. I think we're seeing the fruits of that. They've had 3 or 4 weeks that have been really, really good. Crystal Palace, not really so much. I know there's some injuries here and there. It's not super consistent. But again, I'm going to go back to the well. Roy Hodgson, it's never going to be a complete car crash, but Crystal Palace are never going to truly develop or actually get any better with somebody like Roy Hodgson as your coach. This is, the whole old dog, new tricks thing. You're not going to get some transcendent new style from Crystal Palace that really utilizes the likes of Eze, Odsonne Edouard, Ayew, Michael Elise. There's a ceiling, there's a pretty low ceiling, but a relatively high floor with Roy Hodgson, which unfortunately just means that you're stuck in constant mediocrity. I think the next manager hire at Crystal Palace needs to be a smart one, and maybe hopefully something a little bit more long-term or for a developmental coach, which maybe will then move on to a bigger team. But yeah, 2-1 for me, 2-1 for James, relatively convincing there for Bournemouth away from home, which is not something I thought I'd be saying. Brighton Brentford, yeah, tricky one. Brighton very, very hard to pin down at the moment. And again, I think James's result and my results are very reflective of that. Guys, Brentford are a good team. It's very, very hard to put your finger on quite what makes them a good team. I think ironically, I would say it is probably their teamwork and their ability to work as a team. The culture that Thomas Frank has cultivated there since the Brentford Community Stadium has come up. I'm aware it's in Brighton, but I just think there's a real teamsmanship there. There's not a kind of centre of the universe player. Obviously, you have the likes of, say, like Brian Mbeumo playing well. Pinnock has been great this year as well. And obviously, this is all without Ivan Toney, who'll be returning soon. So I think it's really positive signs for Brentford. And Brighton, again, I think they got a lot of early season praise. Transfer values of Mitoma, of Ferguson, of João Pedro, of Pervis Estupiñán, of Dunk, of all these guys are just skyrocketing and everything's looking good and rosy. De Zerbi is one of the best managers in the league, and they've, I think, believed the hype and fallen off a cliff. I think Brentford can kind of catch them here. I don't think it'll be super convincing, but I can just see Brentford eking this one out. James as well maybe just thinks that Brighton will have enough at home to maybe re-establish themselves as a kind of best of the rest type team in the Premier League. Manchester United, Chelsea, yeah. Good luck predicting what's going to happen in this one. James and I have both gone for draws. A few more goals in James's game, a couple less in mine. I think this is a game where both teams will be just happy to take a draw. The onus will be on Manchester United to get a victory here. Rumours and reports that I think I saw on my Twitter feed that several top-level journalists across Manchester Evening News, the Daily Mail, and I think another one as well, being banned from press conferences, which is never a good thing. And obviously lots of dressing room leaks from the Manchester United side there as well. Kind of worrying. Calls for Marcus Rashford to be benched and lots of change. Casemiro and Varane going in January. Lots of big stuff going on. Be interesting to see what happens. I just think that there won't be enough of a goal threat from Manchester United. Chelsea do have good players who can make things happen even away from home, even though they're pretty inconsistent themselves. And I just think Old Trafford, that's a big pitch. Chelsea will be able to do something. James, maybe a little more of a lively game, a little more going on. Again, guys, don't bet on this football match. Manchester United could win convincingly. Chelsea could win convincingly. This could be a boring 0-0. Very difficult game for me to judge, especially tactically as well. And I think you can see that from mine and James's picks there. Aston Villa, Man City. Kind of a really eye-watering affair here, I would argue. And it looks like James and I are kind of having a slightly different thought process here. My thought process is that Manchester City, even though they're away from home, they're going to be ticked off going to Villa Park. And unfortunately, Aston Villa are going to be the ones who face the brunt of it here. Erling Haaland, you saw him at the end getting kind of chippy with Giovanni Lo Celso, angry with that horrible refereeing decision at the end, playing advantage. Again, I think just because of the context of what was going on, more was blown up about that than before. It's still a penalty, a penalty in terms of a foul and, a free kick needed to be taken. It just went to the decision. Yes, arguments can be made about playing advantage and whatnot, and I understand that. But again, there were 90 plus other minutes where Manchester City could have won that game. It wasn't just in that moment that they drew this football game. So to me, a mad Manchester City, quite rightly so, maybe, but I think it's more on them that they didn't perform well enough. Haaland didn't have his shooting boots on last week. So I just think they're going to be mad and they're going to come at Aston Villa again. As we've seen with Aston Villa, no slouches. This is going to be a pretty feisty game, you would imagine. And again, if Manchester City aren't smart with their kind of positioning and attack and counter pressing and whatnot, and how high their line is, there are definitely guys who can go in behind and make breaks happen, and guys in midfield who can play the passes to find those players. So James is 2-1. I totally understand. I just think that this Man City team are going to be fired up for this game and will be able to put 3 in away from home. Everton, Newcastle, again, very interesting game. 2-1 to me for Newcastle United. James has gone for the home win for Everton. I look at a couple of key positions for Newcastle where players are back, and I just think that, generally speaking, that's going to just help them. Alexander Isak being back makes a massive difference. Defense is still pretty solid. The midfield with Guimaraes looks good, and that kid, I think it was Miley, has come in and done a pretty decent job. I know it's at Goodison Park. I know they'll be kind of angry, but this is the funny thing about football. Manchester United go to Goodison Park after the points deduction, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a crazy game, blah, 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 blah. But then Manchester United convincingly win 3-0. Newcastle then quite convincingly beat Manchester United, but James has Everton beating Newcastle. It shows you how fantastic the Premier League, it really, really does. I'll be honest with you, I don't strictly understand James's rationale here on the Everton victory. The only thing I can think of is that Newcastle's away form has not been good this season, and Everton maybe want an opportunity to strike, and maybe this will be it. I just think with the returning players, I'm going to give Newcastle the narrow victory there. Final game of the game week, Tottenham versus West Ham, another London derby like every other game seems to be. Spurs home victory for me 2-1. James going for the away victory 2-1. All I'll say is this with Spurs, back at home, right, still at home, and a couple players coming back. I believe Christian Romero is back, which is going to make a big difference. Instead of playing four fullbacks on your defensive line, you actually have a centre-back who can come in and play there as well. Obviously, he's still going to miss the likes of a James Maddison, but Kulusevski's looking okay, looking better. Son's still playing very, very well. Midfield looks solid enough to still be able to compete. Brennan Johnson, I think, gives you good legs, chasing things down, running channels, that kind of thing. And again, West Ham away from home, I just don't think will have strictly the conviction, especially the result we saw against Crystal Palace, that 1-1, little bit of a board draw with Palace not playing so well. I just can't see West Ham scoring here, but of course they're a goal threat from set pieces, from individual brilliance, from the likes of a Kudus, who's playing really, really well, James Ward-Prowse set piece, Souček from a set piece, Lucas Paqueta pulling out some magic. So again, I understand James's rationale on the 2-1 victory. I just think it's going to be way too much past Spurs, especially how kind of well they played really against Manchester City, even though they were lucky and let off with a couple of chances. Guys, as per usual, let us know what you think in the comment section below. We need your predictions down. How are you getting on for the season? James and I both tied with 89 points. Just as a reminder, a point for the correct result and a bonus point if you get the correct score. I know I mentioned it at the beginning, but it would be really, really helpful if you hit that subscribe button, drop a like on the video while you're down there as well. Hit the bell if you want the notifications. Again, we're getting into midweek game weeks, and James and I finding the time to record is very, very tricky, but we're trying our best for you. I'm sorry you've just had to put up with me today droning on. I usually take up most of the time anyway. Until next time, game week 16 will be coming out hopefully in a couple of days, maybe even tonight. We'll see you.